When we talk about launching a beauty brand, we often focus on the front-facing story. So the founder's mission and the branding and the formulation journey, all really exciting things. But behind every successful product lies a quiet powerhouse, the manufacturer. And that can be the indie beauty brand themselves, or it can be a contract manufacturer. It's here in busy labs and buzzing production lines that ideas become real, that prototypes turn into products, and that indie dreams scale into global success stories. Contract manufacturing isn't just about filling bottles. It's a partnership, one built on science and precision and timelines and trust. And it's also where brands navigate big decisions about ingredients, packaging, batch sizes, safety assessments, and much more. And for many founders, especially those starting out, it can feel like stepping into a whole new world. But it's a world full of potential where the right collaboration can take your product further than you ever imagined. So what really happens behind the scenes? And what should beauty entrepreneurs know before they pick up the phone to a manufacturer? And how can you set yourself up for success from day one? So today we're going on a guided tour of that world, and I promise you, you'll never look at a made by label the same way again. Welcome to Green Beauty Conversations, in which I challenge the beauty industry to become sustainable, champion independent and green beauty, and encourage you to join me in making beauty better. I'm your host, Lorraine Dallmeier. I'm a chartered environmentalist, biologist, and CEO of award-winning online organic cosmetic formulation school, Formula Botanica. We have tens of thousands of students in over 190 countries around the world who study with us to become organic beauty formulators and entrepreneurs. Visit our website at formulabotanica.com to try our free online formulation course. And if you want to be the first person to know what's happening in green beauty, make sure you subscribe to this podcast in your favorite podcast app. So in today's episode, I'm joined by Dan Williams, the CEO of Orean Personal Care, which is an award-winning beauty manufacturer with facilities in both the UK and the US, and they're the UK's only beauty B Corp-certified manufacturer. Over the past 12 years, Dan has led Orean through remarkable growth, building a reputation for excellence in the masstige premium personal care segment. Orean specializes in high-performance skincare, hair care, body care, and sun care products, offering full turnkey services from formulation and packaging to manufacturing and delivery. With a strong focus on transparency, collaboration, and client ownership of intellectual property, and we'll talk about this inside the episode as well, Orean supports both indie startups and global beauty brands with commercial and technical expertise across two of the world's fastest growing beauty markets. Hi, Dan. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. And I'm really pleased that you're on my podcast because I've been on your podcast before and now we're switching sides. So it's great to have you here.
No one knows about my podcast. It was a long time ago now.
Well, they know about it now because we've just talked about it. What was it called? Pocket Mentor?
It was Pocket Mentors, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah,
so you can still find it.
Trying to inspire people during lockdown. That was the premise.
There you go. Well, for those people who don't know you or Orean or, in fact, your old podcast, can you please give us a quick introduction to the business and what you do there?
Yeah, so I'm Dan Williams, CEO of Orean. We're a UK manufacturer, and we've also got a manufacturing site in the US, focusing predominantly on skincare, hair care, bath and body. We have a full R&D development team, compliance and reg support. We help with packaging sourcing. We do the full scale up when it comes to manufacturing, the filling and the pack off, and then we deliver it to a customer's warehouse where they go and become super successful and sell it to all their consumers in a nutshell.
Love it. So paint a picture for us. How big are your facilities? I'm trying to picture it in words.
Yeah, cool. So in the UK, we've got two sites, both of about 35,000 square foot. One is our manufacturing and filling operation. Another is the warehouse. Under that site, we've got about 200 staff members. So trying to help you get a flavour of how big that might be. We've got a mezzanine floor, which helps. We have vessels varying from 50 kilos up to 5-ton with a 12-ton holding vessel. When it comes to filling lines, we've got 4 high-speed filling lines, a cooling tunnel, 5 tube machines, plastic tubes and aluminium tubes. And then we've got a R&D formulating development lab as well. And then in the US, we're in Hobart, Indiana, and it's a 72,000 square foot site because there's a lot more land available. So it's basically replicating what we've got here in the UK, but it's a lot easier because it's all under one roof.
Amazing. It sounds huge. And am I correct in saying that you guys produce 30 million units a year? Is that right?
Oh, more than that. No, actually, is it? In the UK, we're doing around 28, 30 million units a year. Wow. And in the US, it's probably about 11 million units at the moment.
Wow, that feels absolutely enormous. So what does a typical day look like when you're in the facility and there's clearly a lot going on?
That isn't a typical day, is there? So I don't know. I think we're definitely, from USP, we've always tried to be fast-paced, energetic. We're definitely, I would say, high energy and smiley. Everyone's got a can-do attitude. So I think the typical day is if you were to come on site, you'd be greeted by people walking through reception, asking if you're okay. That tends to be the general vibe that people get from there. And then it just feels that it's very high energy and everyone just seems to be on with their own area. I pride myself on giving autonomy to people. So everyone's just busy doing their own thing and helping. But I think the biggest challenge is, well, not challenge so much, but our key to our success is probably how well everyone works together. During stressy times, you can get everyone in their own little silos a little bit, but to get the projects launched and from A to Z as quickly as we can, everyone has to pull together. So there's a lot of small, quick meetings that go on just to speed up communication and get things happening as quickly as we can. But yeah, I think you'll just get a bit of a buzz, I suppose, the best.
So are you typically manufacturing for one brand at a time, or are there lots of different brands being manufactured for at the same time? How does that work?
Yeah, we're doing multiple brands at any one time. During a day, we might be running 20 different brands, I think, across all the lines. It must be in that ballpark. So yeah, we don't have dedicated lines to people. Again, the flexibility is one of our key strengths, and we have to always ensure we've got the capacity to work in that way. So yeah, I think we've got a team of 5 account managers. They've all got a number of accounts that look after themselves. So there's a lot of collaboration amongst the team to make sure that everyone's able to get their customer's order out, if that makes sense. But to have the best chance of doing that, we don't set our production plan. And this is another thing that just blows people's minds, for next week until the Thursday of this week. That's just to give the brands all the flexibility that they need. If a new opportunity arises, or if suddenly stock is sold out and they need stock quickly, then we tend to have the capacity available to be able to react that quickly, if the raw materials and packaging is available.
Wow, that is amazing. I would never have expected you to be planning out the week ahead, literally a couple of days before.
Yeah, I mean, the orders on the system, we're scheduling and everything's fine from that, but we don't fix that and go firm with it, just because of supply chain challenges and delays, but also those big opportunities that come in as well. So great from a relationship builder if you're customer facing, or in fact everyone in our business is customer facing. I don't think there's many people that haven't met our brands. But from an ops perspective, a little bit more challenging, as you can imagine, but they understand the importance of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, it sounds absolutely phenomenal how much you're dealing with. How many brands are you working with?
I think last year in total, it was around the 100 mark. In the US, not so many, I think 15. But yeah, the UK about 100. And they vary from small startup founder-led brands, the brands that can come through, like or through your academies and stuff like that, up into established brands that are looking for something different, and then we can start working with them. So it really goes across that whole scope.
Yeah. Well, can you walk us through that whole scope? A brand comes to you. Imagine they're an indie brand. They've made first contact. How do you get them all the way to finished product? Can you walk us through the sort of high level stages?
Yeah. So, and again, it really does vary. But if you're that indie brand, or you've just got an idea in your head, so we sit down originally. So that might come through a LinkedIn post or a welcome email or directly to my inbox, because everything that we work on is very much through referral. So we'll kick it off by having a call, because we feel that there's not always stuff you can get across on email. So we try and tee up a call as quickly as we can. And by then you start exploring a bit more about, I suppose it's like a very, very light touch Dragon's Den, but understanding a bit about their background, what they've been after, because we really want to make sure we're not wasting anyone's time. So we want to make sure it's the right fit for both parties. And we want to make sure that we're the right partner to help them. And if we're not, we can recommend someone else. So we understand a bit about the background, then a bit more about the business. How far down the line are they? Do they need us to formulate? Have they been doing it themselves? Are they working with a third party? And once we've gathered all the information, and target price, things like that really helps, because you want to make sure that it's grounded in reality, and you can actually deliver on the customer's brief and what they're really desiring, and it's not going to be prohibitive from a commercial perspective. And then once everyone's got into that good space, we then set up another call, usually with the development chemist, where we can have a chat through about their brief to make sure that they're going to understand it. When I was an account manager, I used to hate being the bottleneck because I'm not technical. I don't pretend to be technical. I think people often think I'm more technical than I am, but I hated being the bottleneck and just that middle person where it was adding no value. So then we've worked really hard to make sure that the development chemists are comfortable being customer facing as well, so they can really dig into the brief and understand what it is required. Equally, that's a balancing act. We want to make sure that we're getting the value out of the chemists and they're doing what they love and what they're passionate about, which is being at the lab bench rather than being on a call with a customer. So it's an absolute balancing act from that. But I think that initial call is really important to make sure that we can understand it. And then it'll go to the lab, and then probably, depending on the complexity of the brief, you get your initial samples within 2 or 3 weeks. Then we get the feedback after that. Subsequent samples every couple of weeks. And it's the same timings for the US, despite it all being here in the UK.
Oh, okay.
Because we don't want to duplicate all the different overheads. We might touch on that in a bit from the US. And then we have a seal process. Once all that's been signed off, you can go to the scale up. So we've got a team of process chemists, scale up the liquid, where most of the time it goes without a hitch, but it's not an exact science all the time when it comes to the scale up. But we can work through that with the brands, which is great. And then we take the scaled up liquid, that gets signed off once everyone's happy with that, and the packaging that's arrived on site will then go through to the filling. I think what's important as well, at that briefing stage, as well as the formulations being worked on, if we want to work in tandem with the customer on packaging, we do that as well, and then we make sure they're fitting. So we've got 2 teams that are working in parallel, and then at the point where they've got a solution, it comes together to make sure it's compatible and it's going to be the right fit.
Amazing. So what's the sort of time frame that we're looking at then, from someone making first contact to getting a product that they can then put on a shelf somewhere?
Again, it depends how far they've gone down that route already. But I think if we're just getting a brief and they haven't worked on the formulation, on average, it's probably 9 to 12 months. And that's ensuring that you've got full stability that's taken place. And then you've got the lead time for the packaging and the raw materials. So the stability takes about 12 weeks, and then you have the lead time on packaging and raw materials. That's anywhere between 12 and 16 weeks from a standing start.
Yeah.
That's a big chunk of it.
Actually, that seems incredibly reasonable. So what about brands who already have their formulations? If they come to you, how does that work?
Yeah, that's happened more, I think, post the pandemic, which has been fascinating. So we call them tech transfers. So people have developed it. They'll come to site. Sometimes they want us to go into production straight away, which is fine because they've usually done the stability testing and the challenge testing, everything else that goes with it. If that is the case, we still want to do the stability and the challenge testing so we can understand what happens with that product over a period of time. So we can monitor that ourselves anyway. But if they're happy to do it because they've got the dossier, we can go into production and we can do that straight away. We still, before processing a purchase order, we obviously want to make sure it's working on a commercial level again. So we'll go to the lab, we'll make up the sample, make sure the customer's happy that we can replicate it. If they're happy with that, we go share the costs. And if that's good, then they can raise a purchase order and we can really move as quickly as raw materials and packaging allows. But some customers, they want us to do all the testing first, and that's fine. But there's other complexities, I think, with people coming with finished formulations, and so much there might be a lot of unique raw materials in there that are specific, and then you have MOQ challenges. But again, we're happy to work through that and offer some suggestions. But if they really want to use those specific materials, we can do. We just got to find a suitable way of executing it to make sure it works for all the parties.
Well, can we talk about that in a little bit more detail, actually? Because I think a lot of people who want to start a beauty brand maybe aren't really aware of that, because I presume they think, oh my God, you've got these huge facilities. There must be just vats of ingredients there. You've got everything. I can just use whatever I want. But that isn't necessarily the case, because, of course, sometimes you have to order these really specialist ingredients. And then there's excess, which I presume not all the other brands will be using. So how does that work exactly?
Yeah, so it's a fair assumption to make, because at any one time we've got, I think, at the moment we've got 4,000 active raw materials, and at any one time there's about 1,500 on order. So I would say it's a fair assumption to go, they've probably got everything that I need, but there's new things coming out all the time. Other people, other formulators might know what works for them as a base formulation, so that they've got like their go-to chassis, if you want, which they know they can deliver them finesse for the brands. When you do get the formulation you're looking at, there could be some unique materials. So and you may only need 2 or 3 kilograms to make the batch size that you need, but the minimum order quantity might be 250. So our first case might be, it sounds like I've exaggerated it, but that definitely happens in those situations. So the first point of course of action is definitely we go to the brand and say, look, we've done your costing. This is your cost, but it's going to leave this amount of excess. We've had a look at our own portfolio of raw materials. We believe we've got almost like a direct match or replacement material. It doesn't change your inky. This is just one example. What do you think? This is your cost. Because usually they then get the benefit of our economies of scale because we tend to be buying the other materials at a higher quantity. And that would be a real quick decision. Sometimes it might be that we've got this material, we've created a sample, we think it looks, feels, performs exactly the same, but there is a slight change to your inky list. What do you think? Here's the commercials. And we really try and do that collaboratively to make sure that we're, again, executing in the right way that works for every party, because we don't want to just be someone that's going, right, you have to do it this way, because there's always a solution to it. But we just want the brands to be fully aware that if they do want to do that, there is an implication and it might be this. So
yeah,
just talking it through and just being transparent, I think that's probably the best way.
Makes perfect sense. And one topic that always comes up in our community is the ownership of formulations. Because, of course, if you guys are developing something for a brand, or maybe even taking a formulation that someone brings from a brand and perhaps tweaking it slightly, like you said, the example of the ingredients just now, who owns the formulation in your model?
Yeah, we've got quite a unique model in so much that when I was talking to you about the due diligence bit at the beginning to make sure it's the right fit, we put a lot of effort into that because we really want, we want people to make sure the personalities are matching as well, because I genuinely want people to work with us for the next 10 or 15 years and enjoy that process of working with Orean and knowing that we're in manufacturing. If something goes wrong in the future, that's fine, but we can work together to solve stuff. So we put a lot of effort into really making sure that's the right fit. So then at which point, once we've come to a conclusion that this does make sense and it is the right fit for both parties, we'll then start doing the product development with no fees involved. And I think other manufacturers might charge a fee up front and then credit once it's launched. That still doesn't really help people if they're trying to manage their working capital very effectively. I think it's still quite a lot to pay up front, and you don't know how long it's really going to take from a timings perspective, but I do get the model. For me, it's most of the brands that we're working with, they tend to be, they've come up with an amazing idea. In my mind, there's no one better to sell the brands in the majority of times than the founder that had their why and their passion and they believed in it. So we always want the founders and those brand owners to be able to have as much working capital as they can up front to be able to market, push and sell the product even before it's launched, or as definitely have it there at the launch time. So we don't charge anything for the product development. And then the next thing that normally comes is, well, who owns the IP, which is your question. And we transfer that IP ownership to the customer the moment they paid their first invoice for the finished stock. And the reason we do it, we put the value for us comes from the relationship and forging those long-term partnerships, not just from invoicing for this, invoicing for that, which actually becomes just an administrative nightmare on a purely selfish level for account managers, finance teams on both sides. It just becomes really challenging. So we transfer that over. And a lot of that was born out of, I've been in the industry for 25 years now in manufacturing specifically, and I've had many brands phone up saying, Dan, who owns the IP? And there was always a little bit of ambiguity. And at that point, it tends to be because they're seeking investment or potentially up for a sale or doing a transaction. So I just wanted to get rid of any ambiguity and just make it crystal clear. So if they're going for a raise or they're going for investment or they're looking to exit, they know they own the IP and they can go at it very, very aggressively during those negotiations that they own it.
I'm sure that's music to many brands' ears as well, because everyone always stresses out about intellectual property, as you said. What about transparency of ingredient sourcing? I think that's quite an interesting topic as well, because nowadays all these brands keep getting asked questions. You know, where did you get this ingredient? How was it grown? How were the people treated who grew it? That sort of thing. When you're a brand and you're working with a contract manufacturer, you don't necessarily have that level of insight. So how do you guys work with brands on that?
Yeah, again, coming back to your tech transfers, some brands come to us and they're very specific. So not even it needs to be this material. We need you to buy this material from this supplier, and these are the reasons why. We'd happily disclose our supply base to the brands that we work with, and that does happen. We're not super upfront by saying we'll do this all the way through, because again, it just becomes admin heavy, and then you're going to have to invest in people. to do that sort of work as well. But no, from a transparency, we're happy to be open about where we're buying it from, what we're doing. In a lot of instances, we're having to do that from B Corp and everything else that goes along with that as well. So there is a level of transparency now that where we've committed to being part of a certain community, we have to do things in certain ways as well. I don't really know the details as to how much you go into it, but I think the transparency piece is pretty much core to our business, and we want to try and share as much information as possible. But the B Corp thing is fundamental because everyone wants to know almost like the carbon footprint of the product and everything that goes through it. So that's not just raw materials, that's packaging as well.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that for a minute, because Orean is obviously B Corp-certified. What does that mean exactly in practice for you guys?
It's quite funny how we've ended up arriving at B Corp originally. Everyone started having a look on. We had no intention of going for it. And then I'm quite an oversharer when it comes to LinkedIn. I like to celebrate people's successes and everything else that's going on with it and showcasing some staff achievements, which is exciting. But I think there were several brands that were going on the B Corp journey themselves, or they'd achieved it, and they started seeing what we were doing and started saying to me, why aren't you going for B Corp? Why aren't you going for it? And in my head, because you're doing this already. So in my head, I had two different routes. I was like, well, we're doing it already, so we don't really need to be B Corp. But then the argument was like, but you're doing it already, so you may as well get some validation, some external validation for the work that you're doing. So we agreed to do the self-assessment and lock ourselves in a meeting room for a couple of days and just come up with the results and see where the points lie. And if we decided if we were close, we'd go for it. And if we were too far away, then it's probably a bit more work to be done over the next couple of years. And I think we were all pleasantly surprised at the outcome. So we decided to go for it there. And now it's just about all those incremental improvements. And I think there's obviously the governance, the environmental sustainability approach to community. And it's all those elements of it that I think I've got an overreaching passion about pretty much all of it, to be fair, but light touch probably in some areas and a lot stronger in others. But we've got definitely people in the business now that are really passionate and strong about each of the elements that make up this B Corp. So you've got people that want to drive it, not because it's B Corp, but because they're truly passionate about those elements of it. So
it's the right thing to do. And I think that attracts in a lot of staff as well, which is fantastic. So coming back to the brands that you work with, have you got any examples that you could provide of working with a brand where you've watched them grow into something big?
Yeah, I mean, we're wrapped in a lot of NDAs. So there's not a lot of brands I can mention, but you alluded to the podcast at the beginning of your podcast. And my first guest on that was actually Mark Curry. So it's completely in the public domain that we're working with Inculus. So he won't mind me saying it. And Colette's been phenomenal before being at an awards ceremony and name dropping Orean and giving a little wave, which has been lovely. But yeah, I remember meeting them in Lyon after working with Mark on another couple of projects historically, but met Colette and Mark in Lyon, and they were talking through what they want to do and how they wanted to go about it. And we decided that we'd go along with that and join them on that journey. And here we are. I don't know how many years later it is now, but I think, and it's been phenomenal to watch them. Actually, they're really great people, and it's just great to be a part of something like that where you genuinely think like you're helping, you can add some value. And I think it's been repaid on both sides, because from the relationship they allowed us to continue to invest in the US because they've been doing really well out there. So I think it's a real good example of a collaboration. And I think other brands that we work with, they tend to be sold in the likes of, well, e-commerce is massive, TikTok shops, then Ulta, Sephora, the Boots, those kind of outlets. And that tends to be where the line we sit in. We've got some other brands that are in the top 4 grocers in the UK, and we have one that's in a discounter. But yeah, the main tend to be around that Sephora, Ulta kind of sweet spot. It seems to be where we find ourselves.
So for our listeners, next time you're in Sephora and Ulta, you may never know if you perhaps are picking up a product made at one of Orean's facilities. But I love that the Inculus obviously are so public about their support for you guys as well. And it must have been amazing to watch them grow from something small to where they are today with such a big, well-respected brand.
Yeah, no, it's phenomenal. I was having a conversation last week with some people, and we were name dropping a couple of other brands. Everyone had an example of some that have just blown up super quick. And sometimes people have no idea how it's happened, but it just tends to be one of those brands. Timing, execution, the clear messaging. I think if it was easy to replicate time after time, everyone would do that. And I don't think it is, but I think, they've done a phenomenal job. Equally, there's so many other brands that we partner with that are so vastly different, but they're all having a similar success and not quite the same trajectory. It's really fascinating because some of the brands we work with, they're unashamedly, we want to launch this, we want to grow it really quickly, and we're going to raise. Obviously, there's benefits that massively come with it, but you slowly start losing some ownership and some control over your brand. But some people don't mind that because they just want to create this brand. We work with some other brands that have done it the other way, where that slow organic growth, and again, it's not for everyone, but they don't want to dilute. They want to retain full ownership. And I just think it's amazing watching that. And I think that's why we try and find ways of taking as much friction away as possible to make things as easy as we can for the brands. So if they want to grow in that way, we can support them to do so. Equally, if you can help these other ones grow. And I think that's why the UK and the US has been exciting for the brands, because it just kept things easy for them. They didn't have to go and have a look for another US partner, start a new relationship, go out there and have a look around the site. They've got a trusted partner already. And I think that's helping us quite a lot.
Is that why you expanded into the US? I mean, you said at the beginning that you've got this huge facility in, is it Indiana? So what prompted the move to the US?
Well, we're privately owned as a business anyway, and we've got two super supportive shareholders. And I must have been in, I can't remember if it was 2016 or maybe even a year before that or after, but it was just an AOB as a board meeting, which we have once a month. And I suggested that we should consider opening up a site in the US, because I think at the time 4 or 5 of our top 10 brands were starting to get traction, and they're nothing but receptive and interested when I come up with silly ideas, and that was one of them. So we just stayed on a lot longer, and we were just working it through on a whiteboard. And one of our shareholders is based in the US, one's in the UK, so it made the option to do it a little bit easier probably than it would have been if we were just all isolated here. And they also had another business. It was a polymer-based company at the time, so slightly vertically integrated, but not too aggressively. And yeah, they just thought it was a nice thing to do, I guess, to support the brands. So initially we did it as a loss leader. We were manufacturing the liquid in the UK, shipping that out, doing the filling out there, knowing that at one point when we've got the critical mass, then we can start putting down the manufacturing. And that's what we did. So in 2020, we relocated and we opened up Orean Beauty Inc. at the new site in 2022. Yeah, that's how that's panned out. But it was purely just to support British brands going out there. We've only recently employed a US account manager now based out of New Jersey just to start looking after US brands, because suddenly the more you go to shows, the more you meet new people, you start building these relationships, and slowly but surely the name's spreading out amongst the US through word of mouth and osmosis and all that kind of stuff. So it's working really well from that side. But it was purely just to support the UK brands in the US market. And it's really weird because it sounds ridiculous in hindsight. I did know at one point, once we're fully established, then we can start talking to the US brands. And that's happening now. What I hadn't considered is when you start talking to the brands in the US, suddenly the attraction of working with Orean isn't just the US site, because there's a lot of those. They're now getting to talk to a US site that also has the UK capabilities. So now we're looking to do the UK and the Europe for some of the US brands that we've been talking to. So, but it does sound, of course that was going to happen, but for not 1 second did I think about it, which is crazy.
Well, that's a beautiful full circle moment then. Yeah. I love that.
Absolutely.
Well, hopefully this podcast may well send some US brands your way as well. Now, how do you feel about working with indie brands? So people who are maybe just starting out or are working in smaller batch sizes. Does Orean work with them as well?
Yeah, we do. Again, we do a lot of the due diligence to make sure we're the right fit, because there are some smaller manufacturers out there that, small, it's a really interesting one, Lorraine, because small volume, no matter who you talk to, often means something really different. During the lockdown, to work with indie brands and I'll start again, because during the lockdown, I was having, not a crisis, but we ended up having to separate our senior management team to have some people on site, some people working remotely. And I love being around people, but because I didn't specifically manage a department and I was looking after essentially the senior management team, it was deemed that it would make sense then if I was one of the ones working remotely. And I'm not very good on my own in my own space. I like being around people. And this is probably where it came from. And I started thinking, people might be losing their jobs. Then the Pocket Mentors podcast idea came up, thinking we might be able to inspire people. But then I was also conscious that maybe 5,000 units as a minimum order quantity might just be too prohibitive for some brands or some startups. So I had a chat with the SMT and I was like, I'm thinking of reducing it from 5 to 2.5. What do you think? And it was pretty much unanimous, because it comes back to what I was saying before, that it helps existing brands with working capital. It helps new startup brands, but it also helps existing brands that want to launch new products, but their retailers don't want to take a risk on it yet, or they don't want to put 5,000 units down just in case it doesn't work out. So 2,500 for existing brands felt like a sweet spot that they could try out online. If it sells, they can repeat buy it from us and put it back online, but they can also go to their retailer if they've got retail space and say, this is sold really quickly. How about we can increase the listings, or at least 1 in, 1 out? I'll go from there. So that was it. But yeah, the indie brands, it seems to really work in that space now. And I think 2,500 is okay. Again, similar to the raw materials, you come back to packaging MOQs and when you're doing such small runs, because they tend to be around the 10,000 mark. So again, we're trying to find the right way to make it as easy as we can for the brands that we talk with. So we're now willing to go free issue, which is the brand owner themselves supplying packaging, if it's 2,500 or 5,000 units, because then they can manage the packaging and just send that in as they need it, order by order, rather than us buying 10,000 bottles, but we don't need 7,500 because they only want 2.5. Again, that gets a little bit messy, and it doesn't tend to be conducive to relationship building when you're having conversations about excess. So again, we want to be doing the bits that add a lot of value. Once you get to that 10,000 mark, you feel that you can push it on. Interestingly, we do have some indie brands from a startup phase that they want to start ordering 20,000, 50,000, especially in the US. It's just a different size market and you can get one listing. So yeah, that what's small to some people. What is interesting, we spent so long telling people as we were coming out of the pandemic that we'd reduced our minimum order quantity level to 2,500 or 2,500 units, I would say, in the US. We then started getting questions as, yeah, but that's okay, but who do I go to when I need 10,000 units? I'm like, oh, no, that's the easy bit. So I had to keep reminding people that the scale is not the problem. So we now say it's 2,500 units up to 2.5 million plus. We can do that. But yeah, I love founder-led, passionate brands. They come with their own challenges. Like I'm sure dealing with manufacturers does as well, but they tend to be really exciting. They're really pushing the boundaries about what they want to do, the stories that they can tell. And I think the social media platforms are great for that now. And
absolutely.
You get a lot of excitement out of it. And
I mean, we've got a graduate who sells, 2,500 units in an hour on TikTok Shop. So for some people, as you say, small means different things to different people, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But, if you've got a tested concept, it can absolutely fly off the shelves.
Yeah.
So what's one thing that you wish every beauty brand knew before they approached Orean? I know that's quite a hard question.
Yeah, no, I think the time it takes probably, despite me saying it's 9 to 12 months, I think just that you can't, and that can come through for product development or production, because what tends to happen is you have a launch date in mind, you create a critical path, and as everyone would know, let's have a project managed. There's a lot of flex during a critical path and you need to understand what the key dependencies are, I guess. But the only thing that never really changes is that stock in warehouse date. So we're really up against it from that side. So I think just having an understanding of that manufacturing process, I think would be super cool and super important. There's a lot of times where we've had conversations in the past with new brands that we've worked with and you ask, I'm just naturally inquisitive, so I'm chatting away to them and I want to understand their background and how they've ended up doing what they do. And sometimes they end up saying, well, I've worked at another manufacturer, so I'm sure that raises alarm bells. I'm like, no, absolutely not. Actually, that's really exciting because it means that you're actually going to understand this whole process, which really helps from there. Because often it can take 4 or 5 weeks to approve an artwork, whereas we've got to get all raw materials in, pick them, manufacture, and turn that around in 48 hours. So it's just, again, we always try and do it as much as we can, but without incurring risk, I suppose. We've, in the past, we've tried so hard to deliver on a customer that sometimes you've just, when you rush something, you can make a mistake, especially because everyone's human. So it's trying to make sure we're slowing down to speed up, if that makes sense. And just understanding, I think another point would be just understanding, and this has come from Daniel Campbell in the lab, just a bit more time at the briefing stage will just save so much more time in the long run. So really understanding the costs that you've got to work with, who your target consumer is, the countries that you're wanting to sell the product in. And that might not be tomorrow, but ideally we've worked with brands before that they've been adamant, no, we're just looking at the UK. Then an opportunity comes overnight because suddenly someone's seen them on TikTok, like you saying, oh, can we discuss the listing? Then you realise, oh, there's a material in there that isn't compliant in this market. So just understanding the markets that people want to sell in, I think.
Yep. Lots of food for thought for potential beauty brand founders who want to approach you. So if they do want to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
You can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty visible on there anyway, but we've also got an email address, which is welcome@orean.co.uk. So that's a good way of getting in touch with myself and our account managers. We pick up those and we respond to everyone that comes into that inbox. Equally, if you can connect with me, there's other account managers on the LinkedIn profile where you can find us, and everyone's super, super responsive and happy to help.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Dan. We will include all of those links with the show notes. It's been such a pleasure chatting to you today. Thank you for giving us an insight behind the scenes in the world of contract manufacturing. And can't wait to see what else Orean does in the future. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. It's great to talk to you again.
See you soon. I would love to hear your thoughts on this episode. Have you ever considered what happens behind the scenes at a contract manufacturer? Leave us a comment on our social channels as both the Formula Botanica team and I love hearing from you. And if you want to hear some more episodes about the topics we discussed today, please do have a look at our other content. So some great examples include episode 169 on this podcast, in which I interviewed Sean Russell of the B Corp Beauty Coalition about what a B Corp is and how the beauty industry is embracing this standard, which Orean, of course, has as well. Or have a look at the YouTube video that we released in May 2025, where we take you on a tour behind the scenes of a different contract manufacturing plant, so you can see what it looks like inside the factory. There is a wealth of information in our old episodes and our other content, and I do encourage you to go back and listen to the rest of our podcast episodes. So thank you for joining Dan and I for this latest episode of Green Beauty Conversations. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please do leave us a 5-star review so that other people can enjoy these conversations too. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever your favorite podcast app is, and stay tuned for the next episode. Follow Formula Botanica at Formula Botanica on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Pinterest, LinkedIn. We're everywhere. And come and give me a follow at Lorraine Dallmeier on Instagram or LinkedIn. Visit our website at formulabotanica.com and sign up for our free online formulation course today.